નમદુબેન છે.
நான் ஒரு பெண்.
હું કરી શકું છું.
எனக்கு தன்னம்பிக்கை உண்டு.
હું કામ કરી શકું છું.
என்னால் எதையும் சமாளிக்க முடியும்.
હું બધું જ સંભાળી શકું છું.
என்னால் எதுவும் முடியும்.
હું એક નારી છું.
நான் ஒரு திறமைசாலி.
என்னால் எதையும் சமாளிக்க முடியும்.
હું એક નારી છું.
எனக்கு திறமைகள் உண்டு.
என்னால் முடியும். என்னால் முடியும்.
હું સંભાળી શકું છું.
என்னால் எதுவும் முடியும்.
Voices of Faith, where all voices count. Today, on International Women's Day, our Voices of Faith Forum in the heart of the Vatican celebrates love, generosity, inspiration, and forgiveness, remembering that mercy requires courage. I am Mary Lou Falcone, chairwoman of the Voices of Faith Board of Directors, and on behalf of the board and the Fidel Goetz Foundation, I welcome you all today and thank you for sharing this afternoon with us. In a world where there is so much suffering, so much need, so much pain, it is our mission to highlight positive work that empowers hope. Pope Francis has consistently sent a very clear message that the Church is the voice and face of mercy. Voices of Faith has made its focus to accompany the poor, relieve human suffering, advance peace, and extend mercy. Especially in this year of mercy, we share today the incredible stories of people who are living this message, reaching out and making our world a better place. In the words of Umberto Eco, to survive, you must tell stories. To those who have tirelessly worked to make today possible, thank you. To the Goetz Foundation for their belief and their support, we thank you. And a special thank you for the leadership of Chantal Goetz. And a most humble and very special thank you to Pope Francis, Cardinal Parolin, and all of those at the Vatican whose support continues to be invaluable. Ladies and gentlemen, we present with great pleasure Voices of Faith 2016.
There's a flame that's ignited
Thank you for your gift of song. And now it gives me the greatest of pleasure to introduce our moderator and friend, Magali Laguerre Wilkinson. While born in New York City, Magali's deep Haitian roots have informed her life and her work. Currently, she is a CBS News magazine correspondent and producer for CBS in New York for the show 60 Minutes. So we welcome Magali.
Really? Thank you very much, Mary Lou.
Thank you, Magali.
Wonderful. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to all who are here and to our streaming audience, of course. They're very important. To the 3rd annual Voices of Faith conference on this International Women's Day. In this year of mercy, we've all been asked to show the mercy of God. We know of God's compassion and love, and yet as humans, we are all so involved in our day-to-day lives that we have been conditioned to sometimes ignore or even turn a blind eye to the suffering of others. The church has asked all of us to reflect on God's mercy, not just this year, but always. So today we are going to meet a group of extraordinary women and a couple of exceptional men, they're invited too, who followed this tenet, and we're here to highlight their works and honor them. Having lived through the war in Croatia in the early 90s, Dr. Katarina Kruhonia saw firsthand the horrors of war. She admittedly had feelings of us against them in the beginning, but those feelings were overpowered by the fundamentals of her faith, to love our enemy. But it's not easy. Katarina has herself chosen to have an open dialogue as part of the peace process by reinforcing the culture of nonviolence and especially forgiving and loving the enemy. Katarina is not just extending the message of mercy, she's actually living it. Katarina will deliver some opening remarks, after which you will hear some unforgettable testimonials. Katarina.
Thank you. My story began in the midst of my personal crisis, when I was lifted on my feet again, by becoming aware that God's unconditional love embraces me and embraces all other, and embraces also all of creation. This led to the fundamental and fundaments for my future peace work, some 15 years after that, and for my deep commitment for nonviolence. The violence disintegration of ex-Yugoslavia, and particularly the war in Croatia, came for us ordinary people unexpectedly and spread like a wildfire. It seemed as if there was no alternative except either us, either them. But this logic of total war actually alerted me, and I just stick to my will to love enemy as in the same way as Jesus would be. This choice actually became my Passover. With it, I stepped out from the logic of violence, and it was if I could breathe again. And very soon, I became ready to explore how I can contribute to build peace. I met people from my own community and from all over the world with the same commitment. In great majority were women. Together with peace organizations from Croatia and from Serbia, we opened lines of communication and started a dialogue. It was a step into unknown and against political will on both sides, and not easy at all. An example: After 5 years of war and separation, we wanted to support Croatian and Serbian women from one small village to meet again. Despite of fear and resentments, these women decided to cross the line of division and try to live again. When we approached them and asked them what could help you in this first meeting, Croatian women said they could not even imagine how they would react hearing Serbian language spoken again. So we just sit down and we read from one Serbian book until they felt more at ease. The Serbian women, they said they could not speak at all because of fear. So we just sit with them and talked to break the ice. They met, they started to talk to one another. They visited their small village together for the first time. So what I have learned from these women is that undermining violence is about transforming contempt and fear to empathy and solidarity. It is about taking the risk to come close enough to suffering or to differences which scare us. Today, 20 years after the war, I encounter even deepen division and deepening division, ideological radicalization, and growing exclusiveness in our society. Reconciliation is still the dream of just a few of you. In Croatia, I don't see that it is in the heart of my church, and it pains my heart. For my life experience so far, I learned following. Firstly, working for peace should not be postponed, put on hold during the war. On the contrary, it is necessary and it is possible to work for peace during the war. Secondly, it does not finish with the end of the war. In fact, it becomes more complex, more political, and as many women knows, it can also become dangerous. But most important, building peace always relies on love, courage, creativity, and wisdom. A great potential which transforming powers, which is in all of us, and connect us, and fulfills us with joy. And that is what we are come here today to celebrate, building peace together. Thank you.
Thank you, Katarina. Thank you very much. So now we're crossing a body of water to the Bronx in New York City. Sister Mary Doris from the New York City neighborhood of the Bronx has been for the last 26 years a mother that so many mothers-to-be never had. Catholic social teaching states that each and every person has value, are worthy of great respect, and must be free from slavery, manipulation, and exploitation. Sister Mary Doris has restored those values in the pregnant and homeless women within her community. Thank you, Sister Mary Doris, and we recognize you and welcome you today.
Before I begin my story, I want to thank Pope Francis. I want to express my gratitude for recognizing the work of religious women throughout the world, I should say religious sisters throughout the world, in extending God's mercy. Today is also the first day of National Catholic Sisters Week in the United States. So, I am honored to be able to tell my story on this International Women's Day, united with the women of the world with voices of faith. For young moms and their babies has been and continues to be a journey of faith. By that, I mean a journey of listening to the voice of God within and around us every moment. Actually, my journey began when I entered the Sisters of St. Dominic of Blauvelt, New York, 18 years ago. Not 18 years ago, excuse me. When I was 18. Which was not 18 years ago. As a Dominican sister, I taught in Catholic elementary and secondary schools for another 18 years. I did vocation work for our congregation for 3 years. During that time, speaking about religious life to young women who would be considering such, it brought me inward to truly examine my own life in terms of my service and my ministry. I decided to do a 30-day retreat. 30 days of silence for me was a blessing, believe it. To listen, to truly listen to where God was leading me. I prayed for the grace to let go and to follow God's design for me. That's a little scary. It was a surrender prayer at the end of my retreat that brought me to the conclusion that I needed to work with the poor. I needed to leave the classroom the way I knew it. Scary. Shortly after my retreat, I met two of our sisters who worked in the Highbridge section of the Bronx, which is absolutely one of the poorest congressional districts in the United States. What a surprise. I started to notice the dropouts on the street, hanging out on the corners, and I started an adult education program in the neighborhood for those young people. Most of them were feeling abandoned and had no place to feel safe, with little or no support. However, there is one story that changed the course of my life. One of my students in my adult ed class, a young woman, age 21, came to me weeping, sobbing, that her 5-month-old baby girl had been sexually abused by her sister's boyfriend with whom she was living. I needed to do something. God's voice became louder. Then our sisters had their general chapter of affairs in 1987 to address the issues of the day. To my amazement, at the end of the chapter, our community made a commitment to the poor, to work with the homeless, not primarily, but to focus on the homeless. Group of us, following the chapter, decided to work together to figure out what we would do for the homeless. We began to look for a house because that's what I wanted. I wanted a safe space for some of my students. We identified an empty convent in that neighborhood that Mother Teresa's Missionaries of Charity, the priests' Missionaries of Charity, were living in. Then I found out they were moving out, and we identified that building. However, we weren't sure of the way that we were going to make that happen. we had a few things to deal with. We were on our way, but not sure of where we were going. Then I was invited to the synod in the New York City Archdiocese of New York in 1988. I had an opportunity to speak at a mic on behalf of poor pregnant women. Cardinal O'Connor heard my voice. The building was made available to us, the empty convent building. The city accepted our proposal for funding, and Siena House opened its doors to 27 homeless mothers and babies on January 23rd, 1990. Since then, we have assisted over 2,000 women and women to move beyond the situation of homeless and poverty to one of independence and self-worth. Our house was named Siena House after St. Catherine of Siena, who worked with destitute women of the 14th century. A quote from her dialogue: "Let me borrow the fire of your spirit and share with all your mercy and burning love." There are so many stories of our women, the women who have passed through our doors. But there is one story I'd like to share with you. It's the story of Michelle, a 22-year-old young woman who suffered in her 6th month of pregnancy of preeclampsia. Now, for those of you who don't know what that is, it's a buildup of fluid throughout the body. She could have died. They did an emergency C-section on her. The baby was born less than a pound. She was devastated. Another sister and I went to visit her. We asked her about the baby. She told us that the baby was not going to survive. The doctor told her absolutely not. He was bleeding on the brain. He had a few more complications. But one of our sisters, Gilmary, and myself convinced her to come down to the neonatal intensive care unit. The three of us, I still remember it, put our hands, 3 hands like this, over this tiny baby, and we prayed for him, for his survival, and I baptized him. At that moment, she named him Jamel. She hadn't given him a name, but she did name him Jamel. She used to, when she came home from the hospital after the baby was born, she went back every day for 4 months to give the baby his nourishment, to hold him, to talk to him, to sing to him. She told me she sang many a song to him. And then she came back to us until the baby was about 4.5 pounds. He came back to Siena House. She left Siena House about 6 months later, got her own apartment, got a wonderful job. She was a very intelligent, very well-educated woman in the sense that she knew her direction. She had finished high school, which is a rarity among our women. However, when the baby was 14 years old, she brought him back to Siena House to join a panel of former residents to talk to our women about the struggle and about hope and about hanging in there. And now he is 25. So I shared this with a few of the friends here at Voices of Faith. I found a card that she had written to me in 1991, thanking us for teaching her the power of prayer. So, if nothing else, that was gratitude. Siena House has provided many programs for our women throughout the years. But the blessing of music came to Siena House in 2013 when I got a call from Carnegie Hall asking if we'd be interested in a project writing lullabies. I thought, that sounds like a very unique idea. Let's see. So they came, and we talked. In the meantime, the Department of Homeless Services called me and said, look, you can go ahead with this if you think it's going to be helpful. Well, when the artists arrived, and they did a beautiful a demonstration of the lullabies, having each woman write her story and play it back, and they played it back with the music attached. All of a sudden, I realized the gifts that have been bestowed upon us. In the midst of the struggle of our women, the Lullaby Project provided them with a time to truly focus on their precious children and not to be concerned about the struggle that was weighing them down. They poured the love in their hearts out in this gift of song to their babies. The women began to realize the gifts that had been bestowed on them as well. But my observation was that Carnegie Hall gave them a moment to cherish their children, to recognize the beauty and honor of motherhood, and to create something beautiful for their children that would last forever. And now I would like you to view one of our women who wrote her lullaby for her daughter Ariel. Her name is Chantal.
When I was younger, I just wanted to be a singer. I wanted to be famous. My mom put me to audition for The Lion King, and I was gonna get it, but I was too short to do it. So they told her to update them on the height, and she never did. If she would have, I probably would have been on Broadway right now. But once the audience comes, I'm gonna get very nervous, and then plus it's people that I know that's gonna be here.
I have the immense pleasure to introduce Chanel. Please meet Chanel. Come over here, everybody. Chanel's a lovely young woman, full of strength and creativity as she sings this incredible song that she wrote with Paula and I for her daughter, Ariel. Oh, she's already singing!
Wrap you inside my arms. Come on, let me hear it. All I really want is you. All I really want is you. All I really need is you. Wrap you inside my arms. All I really want is you.
And Sister Mary has many of these stories of achievement and independent women. That's beautiful, Sister Mary. Thank you very much. So here's the fierce one in the group, right here. I can tell you that Cecilia Flores had every reason to seek vengeance towards those who tried to silence her as a voice for the voiceless, particularly that of women and girls. After being imprisoned for 4 years in the Philippines and incidentally giving birth while incarcerated, Cecilia was released in 1986. Finding the courage to forgive her tormentors has not come easily for Cecilia. Since then, she's been a staunch advocate for women and girls in their fight against modern-day slavery, which unbelievably still exists. Cecilia has described herself as a woman warrior on the ground. Don't be intimidated by her size. She's here to tell you her story. Cecilia.
Thank you very much for that very kind introduction, my dear friend. Thank you very much for having me here. I would just want to start saying that I'm a very lucky woman and a mother, because I have a son who I raised in prison but was able to write a book about her mom, and he called it The Rebel Mom. The CNN also featured me last 3 years ago. Why I'm saying this? Because my life is an open book. You can read it anywhere. But I'm here to share my story with you guys. I hope that this story can inspire
you as well to be a warrior. I was born poor. At 7 years old, I helped to feed my family by selling fish in my town. I do also scavenging work for food. I was a catechist while the Philippines was under martial law, under the dictatorship under Marcos. And the church is not spared to the atrocities of the government. And before I know it, we leaders, even young catechists, priests, nuns, are actually hunted by the dictator. Before I knew it, I was already leading a guerrilla movement in the mountain. I became a mother when I was leading the liberation movement. After 5 years, and always running and hiding, I had to give up my eldest son to a relative just to save him for all, the battles. After 5 years, my husband and I was captured in an 8 hours running gun battle. I am lucky that I'm alive, but 3 of my comrades were murdered in front of me to scare me. While they are nailing to the military, I'm asking for grace, mercy, anything. I'm also nailing to the military to spare the life of this very young man. But he answered me back with his always an officer and gentleman manner, so cold, and told me that, "I'm sorry, madam. This is mercy killing, and we are under martial law." I screamed, I kicked him, And before I knew it, he dragged me away from the body. Soon, I was in a helicopter with my husband, with other colleagues. While I was in helicopter, I have a clear view of the mountain, and I can see their dead body. I want to jump because of desperation and guilt why I am alive. God, I cannot forget that point of my life, how desperate I am, asking God why I'm alive, to suffer this. And before I knew it, I was already in interrogation room with the military who wants to rape me with my 8 pregnant belly. But during the time I'm ready to die, I told myself, this is it. Okay? I'm willing to die to defend myself and for my unborn child. And he cannot believe it, that I'm ready to engage in a hand combat with him that moment in time. And I don't know what happened. Maybe God is so good that he just let me go. He said, "You're a crazy woman, you'll be rotting in jail." And yes, I'm rotting in jail. Few days after that, I gave birth to a son in prison. And this is where I start my family with my husband. We are a family of political detainees. After 2 years, I have another daughter in prison. I can still remember that every day I carry my child on my back, climbing a tree in the middle of prison, just to show them that there is life beyond those 4 walls. Every day is a torture to me to see my children in prison. After 4 years in prison, they called me the hard-headed woman of the revolution. They called me crazy. I said, yes, I am. After 4 years, after a peaceful people's power in the Philippines were free, and I I don't know what to do. I don't know what the meaning of freedom. And this is where I start the organization, the Visayan Forum Foundation. And I thought that our life in prison is the worst life that maybe anybody can endure. But when I started rescuing girls, hearing their stories, I realized that our life is really nothing compared to what they endured. We have girls that were rescued and have promised to work in Africa but end up in Ivory Coast and put in a closet-sized room when men day and night come to use them. And as of now, suffering for different kind of STDs. We have girls 12 years old, 14 years old, that is forced to get the cotton, dip it in a pigeon's blood, put in their sixth organ just to be marketed as virgins again. And that's worse. Pope Francis called human trafficking as a crime to humanity. Last year, he visited Philippines, and he called for mercy and compassion. For the first time in my life, I asked myself, what is mercy? What is the meaning of mercy to a person like me? And it's hard. And I would say that I'm very difficult to find mercy in my heart. How can I forgive and how can I forget when those military girls, those boys in front of me? Is mercy just easy just to say, to forget 4 years of suffering in prison? Is it easy just to forget? After I hear the story of the girls and hear them cry, it's a human agony. I must admit that mercy doesn't, that forgiveness doesn't come easy to me, nor mercy. But after spending time with the survivors in our shelter, I learned how to forgive. I realized that you never have courage if you don't have mercy. And you cannot move on without forgiving. And that's so big words for me, but I embrace it. I know and I realize that maybe God prepared me really for something bigger. And I cannot afford to define my life and the life of the girls based on the suffering that I have. And slowly, I don't know what happened, but my heart turns into a more gratitude. Gratitude, and thank God every day when I woke up that I was asked to serve this way. Thankful that for 25 years, my organization was able to save 17,000 girls, provide them with new life. Thankful that the church is more open now. Catholic Bishop of the Conference of the Philippine partners with us to start prevention program to reach out to the young people, to the youth, to warn them on how to make them a warrior and how to protect themselves, not to be trafficked. God is really so funny sometimes and so surprising. You can imagine, I'm a rebel through and through in my life. And now, I'm actually appointed by the President of the Philippines as a member of the council that oversees, the program of the government in human trafficking. For me, what a joke, right? What a joke, but it's happened. And now I see that it is very important. While they are doing a lot of progress in the field of human trafficking, unfortunately, the problem continues to escalate. We see new forms of trafficking. The youngest that we have now in our shelter is 1-year-old, sold to cybersex. We have 5 years old who are already lacerated. The evil is coming back with vengeance. And next week, I'm going back to the Philippines. I'm going back to my battleground. I know that they will not stop to destroy my spirit, challenge my organization, do everything to stop us from doing what we are doing. But I'm glad that I'm here because I'm inspired. As a Catholic and as a catechist, this is a dream come true for me, to stand in the heart of Vatican. I know that the doors is opening. And I hope that you'll be with me in this fight. I hope that our commitment will just, not a commitment, but translate into action to reach out to more girls. I hope that the church, schools, religious group will open their doors so that we can educate more young people how to protect themselves and to make sure that the next generation will not be subjective to what we have. I hope that this venue, the opening of the church to a woman like me in the ground, bringing our voice here in the middle of the heart of Vatican will continue, just like what the Voice for Faith is doing. My brothers and sisters, freedom is about choice. Choice to do something. Choice to pick up the fight. Choice to make a difference. And I'm inviting you to be part of it. I'm inviting you to journey with us and to respond to the call of our Pope to free the slaves and bring us, these children, closer to God's plan. Because in every day, what life we rekindle, the life that we reconstruct, the future that we bring, we are bringing ourselves closer to Jesus. Thank you very much.
I think we should all take a breath after this. Thank you. Thank you very much, Cecilia. Moving on. So before we move on to our next story, we will here to perform I Am a Refugee is once again the Chorale Bondeco, who have been found. Yes. Please.
So So get to me, you discover, or you don't judge a book by its cover. Yeah, yeah. So get to me, you discover, you don't judge a book by its cover. I'm a refugee, human being like you. So sad I wear, and I know that I'm a refugee, human being like you. So sad I wear, and I know that I'm a refugee, human being like you. So sad I wear, and I know that I can just give me a chance. I can. Just give me a chance. Just give me a chance. No matter how, no matter how. No matter how, no matter how. Oh yes, I can. Oh yes, I can. Oh yes, I can. Yeah, yeah. 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 So, oh yes, I can. Oh yes, I can. Oh yes, I can. Oh yes, I can. Yeah, yeah. 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 Oh yes, I can.
Thank you. They're Rome-based from the Democratic Republic of Congo. Chorale Bondeko. Thank you. And on the theme of refugees, if you've ever felt like giving up, if you've ever lost hope, then look no further to Mercy as a wake-up call for those who've lost hope. Mercy is a young Rwandan girl who grew up in the Dzaleka refugee camp in Malawi. Mercy is one of amongst the 60 million people currently displaced in the world. The average time a refugee spends in displacement from their home is 17 years. 17 years. Living in a refugee camp was difficult, but Mercy never got discouraged. She fought back with the desire to learn and credits education with the help of the Jesuit Refugee Service for having saved her life. She was unable to attend this year's Voices of Faith, but you're still going to hear her message.
They were forced to flee their homes and ran into an unknown life as a refugee. Poverty, no access to education or qualification. Just waiting and watching as life goes by. In partnership with the Jesuit Commons, Higher Education at the Margins, the Jesuit Refugee Service found a way to make online higher education courses available to refugees. Since 2010, more than 3,600 refugees and host community students enrolled the program in different camps and urban settings all over the world.
Being a woman and being a refugee, people might take advantage of you because, you just feel neglected. You feel like you are, like, you're being looked down. But through education, you get to know that you should not be neglected. You should be respected like the others. You can do it. You only need to be motivated and look out for the opportunities that come to you. So you only have to take them or grab them because it's just for you. You are being given opportunities. You need to take them in. So if you accept them, then you also provide something. You provide good results. So the change that I saw from the time I graduated and from Form 4 and when I just finished JCM was that at first I couldn't communicate to people effectively. So I would maybe be in a group of people. They would talk and talk. I would just maybe be listening and not talk. So I wouldn't share my ideas. Yet I had some ideas that would be maybe effective. So nowadays I know the new me or the person whom I got to be from JCM when I finished JCM was that I'm able to share my ideas with people. I really know how to communicate with people. I know how to be effective to the community, to serve the community, like how to approach people in case you feel like these people need something. So, and you are the one to approach. Being resettled in Canada, well, it's going to be soon this August, and I feel excited to see out or to see to experience the other life. So I'm very happy because it's not everyone who's getting these trains, and moreover, I never expected a chance like this. So I only thought that after JCM, maybe I'm going to look out for work in the camp and maybe be busy with that work. So yeah, so I after getting these trains, I felt very excited. I hope that the experience I got from being a refugee will help me be somebody effective to the world and effective to people, especially refugees. You have to give back from what you got, because I never expected to get something like this in a refugee camp. So I need to give it back. So I hope that I will be able to do it.
So Mercy is one of the lucky ones. She was just resettled in Canada, as you heard, last September on scholarship to pursue her university studies. So that's where she is now. But as a reminder, here's a 1.5-minute reality check that will put the plight of girls in context. This was produced by Chantal, by the way, who obviously has all the time in the world to do this, aside from everything else she does. Thank you, Chantal. Beautiful. Thank you. So now we're moving on to my three other friends here. Has it ever occurred to anyone that escaping your family can be a vehicle for social change? Caroline didn't want to be another statistic as a child bride. She saw her sisters married off as teenagers, very young. The same for Judy. Her escape was education, something she pursued before actually falling in love and marrying, as opposed to it being planned for her. Both are from Kenya. But this is not just an African phenomenon. Here we have Father George Menamparampil, right? I did it. Who's on the front lines every day in India, rescuing children as well. Just to give you an idea, over 700 million women alive today were married as young girls. So joining us are Caroline, Judy, and Father George. We're going to have a little conversation, change things up a little bit. Right? So I have to ask you, so first of all, you look absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
And Father George, you look pretty sharp yourself.
Thank you.
Yes. We have to acknowledge the man here. This is all about inclusion today, right? But you know, Judy, your father died when you were 14. And what impact did that have on you and your family?
Before my father died, we lived a very luxurious kind of a life. We went to the good schools, we had good health care, and of course, never missed a meal. But immediately after he passed on, life took a different turn, completely different turn for us. We were forced to move from our big house into a small shanty house. Education became a luxury for us. Food, we barely survived. My mom being uneducated.
Your mother was not educated?
No, she was not educated. She had to fend for us. She worked day and night, doing odd jobs, just so that we could survive. We were 5 kids, with a single mother to take care of 5 kids, provide food, education, and shelter. It was really too much to ask from her. But she tried. She tried so much. She enrolled us to a secondary school. But the second year of my secondary school, at the age of 16, she couldn't finance our education. It became too much for her. At the time, she proposed that I get married.
Now, and was that something typical for a girl your age in Kenya?
Yes, people from a poverty-stricken situation would end up getting married, just so you could have a husband to take care of you. But I didn't want that. My mother herself, she got married at the age of 17. She too was from a poor background. But when she got married to my father, who was well off, her life took a different turn also. So I believe my mom also was hoping the same for me. But I didn't want that. Seeing her suffer after the death of my father, that's the least I wanted.
So was that the moment you realized that education was the key out of this?
Yes. I knew education was the way to success. My mother, if she had been educated, I believe she would have gotten a good job, hence a good income. But due to lack of it, we had to suffer. I didn't want to form the statistic as well. So I chose a different turn. I chose education. I fought against her wanting me to get married. I told my mom that I wanted to pursue my education, and I fought for it. And luckily, I finished secondary school. But that was not the end. I wanted to go even further because I knew only secondary school education would not get me anywhere far. So I began to work. I worked for about 6 years. I remember my first job. I worked for an employer who, after 3 months, began to make sexual advances at me with the promise of giving me a good life. I was naive, I was vulnerable, and clearly I would have fallen for the trap because I wanted a good life. I wanted to go back to school to study. But I decided no, I was not going to sell myself.
You fought back.
I fought back. When the advances became too much, I had to quit work. It was a painful decision to make because I knew probably I would not be able to go back to school again with no money.
And how did you get back on the path of education? Who guided you? Who did you meet along the way?
Quitting my work where I was, I did not give up. I continued to search for work, and I came across one sister.
A nun?
A nun from the Loreto community, Sister Colette. She enrolled me, she employed me at the retreat center, where I worked for 6 years. Over this time, I kept sharing with her my interest of wanting to go back to school, of wanting really to study so hard. She saw the potential that I had and my interest to study even more. And together with a Comboni missionary brother, I was enrolled to pursue my bachelor's. And after 3 years, I graduated with a first-class honors. I made them proud.
And where do you think your life would be now if you had not come across this nun?
Girls in my kind of situation at the time, many that I knew ended up getting married. And of course, with marriage, they have never lived any good life. Many are suffering violence. I know of a friend who also got infected in the process.
Infected?
With HIV/AIDS. Right now, she's taking care of her child single-handedly. The husband abandoned her. And many other friends that I know who've given birth to more than even 5 kids. Living in a poverty-stricken situation, it's really a pity.
Caroline, you're 22 now, but
Yes.
you left home at 15. Why would you leave home at 15?
Well, it's a sad reality to report that I come from a community that is very well male-dominated. And to prove this is through my mother's life. She cannot give her voice out as a wife and as a mother in our family. This is because being in the male-dominated community, my father cannot allow that, and being a drunkard cannot even give the time for my mother to make decision to participate in the planning of the family. I could not tolerate to have myself live the same life she led, life full of poverty, regrets, and cries. She even spends most of the nights when my father comes home in a drunken fury. We spend the night outside in cold and waiting to go to school the following day. I could not see myself in future having the same. Secondly, is through my sisters who married very young. They could not. They always lead lives full of bitterness. They lead lives to and from my mother's place. They come seek for help, which my mother can't even provide. They don't even have voices where they are married. They regret being married earlier. I declared to myself that I won't live this life, and I had to run out of home because I knew if I continued staying there, I'll get married and get to live the same life. So I just had to go.
You say you declared this to yourself.
Yes.
But what other choice did you have?
The very other choice I had is to just
run out of home and go to Nairobi, the capital city of Kenya, where I went and looked for a job. And of course, I got a job and I worked as a house girl.
A house girl. You worked
yes,
as a domestic.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Another demoralizing part of my life, I did not enjoy this, but I had to be out of home and be far away from that life of being married early. So I just had to keep on working as a house girl, a life full of torture and so many complaints and a lot of work. I had no experience of living with a family, not my own, so I just...
They mistreated you?
Yes, it was all about quarrels and misunderstandings because they could not understand my language, I could not understand theirs, and they could not understand that I had no experience of work to work for someone and do it as they wished to be done perfectly. So it was a misery again for me, but I had to stay there to escape marriage.
So it was a better way, working that way was a better way for you to gain your own independence in a way.
Yeah, I embraced the idea than being home.
So who helped you pursue your education? Because something told you this is what you needed to do.
Well, thank God to my God and the Jesuit fathers. Through my cousins, I got to know about a school in Nairobi near Kibera slums by the name St. Aloysius Gonzaga Secondary School. This school offers education scholarships to the very needy and bright kids from Kibera slums. And through my cousins, I got to know the school, visited the school, did the interviews. After the 3 years, I couldn't believe that I can write and do what other children are doing in school. It was a miracle for me. I did the interviews and I passed very well, and I was enrolled in the school come 2012. So I was a student by then.
You know, I have to say that's fantastic because you got out of it on your own and your own determination with a little help from the Jesuits and from your cousins. But, you know, you're very brave to be here, right, to talk about this so openly. What would you like to tell the girls back home in Kenya and everywhere else? What is your message to them, to to girls who are vulnerable, like the two of you? Or who were, I should say, 'cause you're not anymore.
Well, my advice is that every young girl deserves an education, and it will not come to you on a silver platter. You have to stand and fight for it. In my society, women are not respected, much less if you are uneducated. So to the young girls, you need determination and hard work. Don't sleep. Day and night, you have to go out there and really fight for it. At the end of the day, I am proud to be here. Just maybe I didn't mention that out of my experience, my husband and I began an organization to help girls in my kind of situation. We are currently educating a few girls in secondary school who have no way out. And it's just a way of me giving back to the society from what I received.
Father George, the other day we were talking, and one of the things, you said something that struck me, which is in India, the life of a cow is more valuable than the life of a girl. You have to explain this to me.
Yeah, Magali, it's not me who said it first. I'm just repeating it.
Is it true?
And the fact is that in many areas of India, the punishment for harassing a cow is more severe than for harassing a girl. So it's better to be a cow than to be a woman. You will be respected more. You will be looked after better if you are a cow rather than a girl. That's a fact of reality. Sad. Not all over India and not everyone, but it is there.
You're on the ground. You're on the front lines. You're seeing this every day. What's your fight for women on the ground? What do you do?
It's a fact that the maximum number of child marriages take place in India. Don Bosco has always been looking for ways to fight against this. Among the many methods that we have tried successfully, the most interesting would probably be the one of a children's parliament. I don't mean the parliament in New Delhi discussing the problems of the child.
Let's be clear, yes.
But the children, the teenagers in the village, we organize them into the parliament of their own. It's the parliament of the village, children's parliament in that village. They are all members of parliament. They elect a prime minister and 2 or 3 other ministers. And when a problem comes up, particularly affecting the children, they inform the ministers. For instance, a child is going to be married soon, they inform the ministers. And the ministers convoke the parliament, they discuss the problem, they form a delegation, and a group of them go to the parents and tell them, you can't do this. And they have all the arguments that we have trained them in, and try to persuade them to postpone or to cancel the engagement, to cancel the marriage. If they don't, they threaten them, and they actually do it. They go and inform the Child Welfare Committee, which is a structure of the government to deal with problems of children. And if nothing happens, the children will inform the police, because it's against the law. Child marriage is against the law officially. If nothing still happens, they go to Don Bosco, the staff of Don Bosco, and ultimately...
That's you.
That's me or our staff.
Right.
We go to the police, and then the weight of Don Bosco's influence comes in, and some action is taken. We have over 500 parliaments of this sort spread over 3 states of India, and I think we have successfully blocked several hundred child marriages. Thank you.
When you go back home in a couple of days and you've heard Caroline and Judy's story, what message will you convey when they ask you, how was your trip, Father George? What are you coming away from with this?
I would say some people think that, how many girls can we help? Because to take them from kindergarten up to postgraduate level, what do you do? India has got such a huge population. The message I would carry from my friends here, Caroline and Judy, is this, that you don't need to carry them all the way up. You just motivate them, help them in the initial stages, help them to get hold of the lowest rung of the ladder, and they will do the climbing on their own afterwards.
Wonderful. Great. Well, thank you very much for sharing your stories. And really, I have to ask you one last example, because you've given so many, even at Mass this afternoon. It kind of took our breath away. But you have a 30-year-old friend who's already a grandmother. Just put that in context.
Yeah, I was trying to get someone to come to this program in place of one of these girls, 2 Kenyans. As she said, it gives the impression of, so this is a problem of Kenya or of Africa. We wanted to bring someone from India, and we had various problems, we couldn't. But one of the girls, when talking with her, she said she's 22 now, she's a grand aunt. Her elder sister, who is 30 years old, is a grandmother. She is 30, she married at the age of 14, her daughter married at the age of 14, and she has a child. So this woman at the age of 30 is already a grandmother. And another example of this, getting hold of the bottom rung of the ladder, is actually the help from Fidel Goods Foundation. They are supporting us, helping us to support the education of 180 girls, tribal girls from Northeast India, who would not have been able to continue their studies if they had not got some initial help. We are helping them to reach the bottom rung, helping them to complete high school, thanks to this foundation, which is actually, I think, sponsoring also this program.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you
for your stories. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Now we're going to do... Okay. Sorry. Okay. No child brides, educated girls grow into agents of change. Thank you so much. Really well done. Very brave, very courageous. Thank you. Okay. For Sabriye Tenberken and Paul Cronenberg, life-changing events that can be considered an obstacle by many have had the opposite effect on them. But that didn't happen overnight. They know about discrimination firsthand, but in their own words, their pinching point became their turning point. Through their Kantari Institute, they've empowered citizens from the margins of society who've had their own challenges, and by their own example, have become a life-changing inspiration. Let's first give a round of applause to Paul and Sabriye, and Paul is going to get up first and talk. Thank you very much.
The first speaker to present her dream for social change is announced. The audience is silent and waiting. But instead, we hear a fight somewhere backstage. A man and a woman quarreling. Suddenly, they're shouting, and it ends abruptly with the violent sound of some beating up. The audience is confused and shocked. Was this real? Was this a tape? Suddenly, Georgina, the speaker, walks up on stage. She's not looking at the audience. She's facing the ground. She says, and she's talking to herself, she says, I had enough. Enough of daily violence. Enough of daily oppression. So I took my children. I left them with my sister, and I walked. After a while, I found myself in the fields, and I saw a well, and no one around. At this moment, she walks towards the edge of the stage. She looks down. She says, the well was 30 meters deep, and I jumped. And at that second, she jumps off the stage, and I can feel how the audience is holding their breath. Then Georgina gets up. She faces the audience. And she said, I was lucky. There was enough water in the well to break my fall, but not enough to drown. And I was double lucky because when I woke up, I looked in the eyes of the person that saved my life. And at that moment, she's pointing out in the audience, in the back of the audience, and there's a man who is shy and tries to hide away while he gets a standing ovation. Georgina nowadays runs an organization called Janamangal in Orissa. And this organization empowers women to fight and stand up against domestic violence. Sorry. Georgina is a true Kantari. A Kantari is a small but very, very spicy chili. And it has a lot of medicinal values. It lowers your blood pressure, it purifies your blood, it works as a painkiller, and it makes you alert and awake. And it wakes you up better than coffee can. For us, a Kantari is a perfect symbol for a person that turns adversity into strength, for a person that is not a victim of circumstance, for a person that has the guts and the fire in the belly to stand up and challenge the status quo, a person that comes up with solutions for all the new problems. Kantari is also the name of our institute in south of India, in Kerala, where we train people like Georgina, and we empower them so that they can start up their own social projects. They're all people from the margins of society that had enough. At some point they said, stop. Now we've got to do something. All these Kantaris, they come from the margins of society, and the real Kantari chili also grows in the backyard of society. Another example of a Kantari is Jane Waitira from Kenya. Jane is a person with albinism. And if you are born with albinism in East Africa, that's not the best place to be. They don't only fear the sun that burns their skin, but lately they also have to fear to be hunted and killed. Witch doctors promise businessmen and politicians good luck and power if they drink potions that are made of body parts of albinos, or if they carry a finger of an albino in their pocket. Jane is standing up and she fights against these killings. She creates awareness and she risks her life to protect the lives of others. For us, transformation, or when transformation of sorrow to of sorrow to celebration, when pain turns into acceptance, that is a pinching point. And that for us is the moment a Cantari is born.
A Cantari is born when mercy, in the sense of forgiveness and reconciliation, is turned into empowerment and gratefulness. Ladies and gentlemen, if I had known at the age of 9 that one day I would stand here and say, yeah, I'm grateful for all that happened to me, and actually, yes, I am happy to be blind, well, I'm not so sure what I thought. Maybe I would have thought, what nonsense. This woman must be nuts. Well, at the age of 9, my life had a drastic change from sight to blindness. Well, I was a very visual child. I was speeding on my bicycle, I was climbing trees, I was making pirouettes on ice skates. And one day, I remember, I was standing at the banks of a village pond, which was covered with ice, and I was watching my friends circling around on their ice skates, and it made me angry. And I thought, we never had traffic rules on this pond. Why this conformity? So I put on my ice skates, and I went right through the circle. And what I missed out was the hole in the middle. Now, this made me realize that I couldn't trust my eyes anymore. And actually, from that moment, I also realized that gradually I became blind. And I was terrified of becoming blind. Not so much of losing my sight, much more losing my friends, being sidelined, being isolated, and I must admit, I was terrified of being in the dark for the rest of my life. Most of these fears became true. I was discriminated, I was isolated, I was very, very lonely. Yes, and I withdrew from my friends, and at one point I didn't even speak to my family anymore. And my parents, well, they were concerned, but I must say they did good not to interfere too much. And I was grateful because they showed me, with this non-interference, they showed me that they had trust in my ability, that one day I would take myself out of this mess. What they did, however, was they read books to me, books that had something to do with my situation. And one of these books I remember was about the civil rights movement of the Afro-American community, especially in the 50s and 60s. And especially in this time, a lot of the Afro-Americans, they tried to straighten their hair, they bleached their skin with very dangerous skin creams to be lighter, mainly because they wanted to belong, they wanted to blend in. They didn't want to be pushed out by the white community, by the dominating white community. And I felt very, very much like this Afro-American community because I felt pushed out. I wanted to belong. However, it was not like that, and I tried to avoid situations in which my lack of sight became obvious. And then I learned about the turning point of the civil rights movement. The transformation of the concept black being seen as inferior, being seen as not appropriate, to black is beautiful. Now, this felt like a wake-up call to me. I thought, and I still remember, I was lying in my bed and I was fiddling around with the few English words that I knew. Black is beautiful, blind is black, and blind is beautiful. And from that moment onwards, I knew what I had to do. I had to stop whining about the things that I couldn't do anymore. And I had to find out about the advantages. Actually, I had to find the beauty of blindness. But now, what are the advantages of being blind? Well, first of all, a blind person can focus, can concentrate, because we are not distracted by Hollywood and Bollywood and all the advertisements surrounding us. Also, a blind person is actually forced to communicate. We are forced to speak clearly, to pronunciate clearly. If we are not communicating, we, the blind, become invisible. Now, what I found out also was that we, whether we wanted or not, we had to become problem solvers. Being blind, being a blind child, pushed into a sighted society, we had to find our own ways, because everything was made for visual input, visual interaction. And then I figured out something very beautiful. My imagination grew much stronger. My inner visual sense grew much, much stronger. And when I figured this out, I realized that the world didn't become smaller. In fact, I could embrace blindness. I could actually, even wait for darkness. Darkness could come. Let it come. And the interesting thing is, darkness never came. Despite the fact that I became totally blind, the world surrounding me became much more beautiful and colorful because I could fill it with my own pictures, with my own imaginations. And I was hungry to create these imaginations. But to create imaginations, I needed to have experiences. I needed to figure out the world. I needed to have adventures. And that drove me to Tibet, where I met Paul. By the way, I imagined Paul to have black hair. And I like black hair. I like it much more, you know? So, see? Now, Paul and I, we decided to start the first school for the blind in Tibet, because blind people like me are or were ostracized, were outcast. We also started some other projects, a farm, a braille printing press, and all these projects are now run by the blind themselves. And they show to the Tibetan society that actually real sustainable social change can only come from within. This made us think, if it's possible to train blind people from the margins of society and to bring them back and to take their own lives in their own hands, their own projects in their own hands, why not empowering people from the margins, social visionaries from all around the world, women, people who are discriminated, so that they create sustainable social change. And that's how we came to Kerala to start Kantari. In the last 7 years, we trained 141 social visionaries, 141 Kantaris. More than 70% are now successful, and they're reaching more than 12,000 direct beneficiaries. Now, I'm not finished yet. No, these people, they are all survivors. But the interesting thing is, they are all grateful for what happened to them, because it gave them energy. My question is, did they need to have mercy, forgiveness, to overcome harmful memory? To stand up for justice, to stand up for peace, for integration, for equality? Yes, Mercy needs courage and strength. But I'm afraid that sometimes mercy can also result in a standstill. But our Kantaris, they need activity. They need the understanding that they can embrace the challenges, they can stand up, and they can transform guilt and the necessity of forgiveness into empowerment and gratefulness. Actually, they can turn mercy into merci. Now, many people criticize those who question, those who have big ideas. Well, we all of us who spoke today, we heard it so many times. Stay on the ground, don't grab for the stars. You are too small to have these big ideas. But for all of you who are driven by the energy of social change, now you can say, just bite into a Kantari. And you will know that a small chili can make a huge difference. Thank you very much.
Bravo, bravo, bravo. And merci. Thank you to our speakers. Now a chance to digest all of this. And we're allowing you to have a small break. So we'll see you for part 2 in a little while. Welcome back, everyone. I feel like I'm shouting. I hope you enjoyed the break and got to speak one-on-one with all of our unbelievably unforgettable speakers. This positive energy in here is so contagious. I feel like we're all, I don't know, we'll change things in every way that we can. So thank you for all of your inspirational stories and what you continue to do for just the better of humanity, really. Now for the second part of this unforgettable day, here to discuss the expanding role of women in the church. I said it. Women in the church is Father Tom Smolich, who is the international director. What did I say?
No.
Oh.
There's something wrong with introducing a man after you talk about women.
I know. That's the part of it. You know, I'm
There's
trying
an
to
irony.
make you just squirm a little bit.
There we go.
In a good way. All right. Anyway, Father Thomas Smolich, who is the international director of the Jesuit Refugee Service here in Rome. At least you get to live in this beautiful city.
That's right.
Right? Father Smolich's panelists should keep you just as riveted as what you heard in part one. So, without further ado, I turn it to you.
Thank you very much for that introduction. We spent the first part of our afternoon together hearing that mercy requires courage. And we've heard from women and a few men who have been out on the frontiers of our church, of the frontiers of the society, expressing that mercy, and we've seen what courage it has taken. We've also met some of the women who have benefited from that mercy, and we've realized that it takes courage for them as well to get on that first rung of the ladder and to keep moving forward. For the second half of our afternoon, we're going to pivot from the frontiers, from the sort of edge of things, back to the center. What brings us all together here is we are members of the church. We have Pope Francis's picture in front of us, who's inspiring us to bring that mercy to the frontiers, especially through this year of mercy. But we are here in the Vatican, and we cannot and we should not talk about being part of the church itself. Several of us celebrated Eucharist earlier today to begin the celebration of the International Women's Day. And the gospel today is John chapter 5, where Jesus cures a man who has been lying by the pool of Bethesda for 38 years. He's never the first one into the water when the water is stirred. The gospel is quite clear that miracles happen when the water is stirred. Our panelists today are going to stir the water a little bit and talk about both what opportunities have occurred, what things are happening in the church, and some of their visions, some of their dreams, some of what they hope can and should happen in the church. So allow me now to get off the stage and turn it over to them, but let me do that by introducing each of them briefly, starting on my left, your right. Nicole Perron is a graduate student at Yale University, completing her Master's of Divinity degree. She's originally from New Jersey and also is an alumna of Loyola University, Maryland. She's passionate about the engagement and empowerment of women and young people. I have seen her in action, and I know this to be true. Geraldine Sheehan, to my immediate left, is country director for the Peace Corps in Colombia, currently living and working there. She's also a faculty member at the Asset-Based Community Development Institute of DePaul University in Chicago, where she's written, trained, and consulted on how to build communities from the inside out, especially focused on community-led economic development among low-income populations. Her career has been most influenced and informed by her early work with immigrant and refugee populations from Latin America and Asia. Dr. Carolyn Wu serves as CEO and president of Catholic Relief Services, the official international humanitarian relief and development agency of the U.S. Catholic Church. CRS works in over 100 countries and touches 85 to 100 million people every year. The majority of them, I would guess, are women and girls. Previously, she was the dean of the business school at the University of Notre Dame, and she was proudly educated by the Maryknoll sisters, who, as she says, lived their faith with humor, grace, courage, and joy. She's been married for 36 years, is the mother of 2 sons. Petra Dankova, further to the right, is apostolate with the Sisters of the Holy Redeemer, a religious congregation based near Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in the United States. As an international social worker, Petra has 8 years of experience working with forcibly displaced people in large refugee camps in Eastern Africa, as well as urban situations in Europe, Asia, and in the Middle East. And she is originally from the Czech Republic. And finally, last but not least, on the far right is Gayatri Lobo Gajiwala, Gajiwala, pardon me, who was born and raised in Mumbai, India, as a product of an interfaith marriage where both religions worked together to shape her identity and gave her insight in how she views the world today. She holds a master's degree in literature focused on post-colonial theory and writes poetry in her spare time that explores feminist issues and identity. She is currently teaching literature in India to high school students. Welcome to all 5 of you. A little background, each of them began by sharing some reflections personally and then in the group in terms of, as I said, what is going well in the church, where are women's voices being heard, and then later, where might some opportunities need to arise, where does the water need to be stirred. So we'll move in sequence, more or less. And Petra, if I could ask you to open us up with that first question of where have you seen strides and success for the role of women in the church?
Sure. Thank you, Tom. I think the first thing that we have to really ask ourselves is what or who is the church for us, right? And I think it's really really dangerous that we would look at the church in this dualistic view of this man-dominated institution to which women are somehow external. And I think in my own experience as someone who has converted to Catholic faith as an adult, I know that the church that I converted to was a community of my friends and teachers at the University of Notre Dame, where I did my undergraduate studies. A community of people who showed me not just liturgies, but how they lived their faith in their everyday lives. And so I think we right at the beginning, we have to say that our church, yes, it is the Vatican, it is the Sunday Mass that we go to, but it is both much more intimate than that and much bigger than that. And so I would like us to keep that in mind. When I think of the role of women, you know, I wonder if when women were perhaps not as able to move to the top of the hierarchy, if their leadership really focused on moving towards the margins. And you know, as Tom mentioned, I am a postulant with the religious congregations, and the Sisters of the Holy Redeemer in Germany about 2 years ago met a refugee family and decided to give this family a church asylum to help to prevent this family being unjustly deported. And from knowing this family, they saw the needs of refugees and very courageously, with no previous experience, have decided to open a wing of their mother house to 100 asylum seekers and to host them in their own house, essentially. And then when that actually turned out to work, they found another house and started hosting unaccompanied children, and then started using their hospital to provide health care to asylum seekers. Now, where I'm going with all that is that they didn't start looking for leadership. They saw people who were in need. They heard the gospel saying they should take care of the stranger, and from doing that, they have become leaders in this field of assisting asylum seekers, and now other people are coming to the sisters and asking their opinions, asking their advice, and now our sisters are leaders in this field, and I think that's part of the leadership that women in the church are taking up in a great way.
Great. I would like to echo Petra as far as the way religious orders have really taken initiative to empower women and to empower lay people, and really gifting lay people with their charisms. I think that's a really excellent model for the church, and as ever, religious, especially women religious, were at the forefront of that, to the surprise of probably nobody in this room. But I'm also blown away by all the places and spaces women currently occupy in the church as heads of Catholic healthcare organizations, of universities, of different organizations that operate within the church. And in fact, some of them are sitting at this table or in this room today, and they are really my heroines, my sheroes in this. And so I rejoice in how these amazing, important women are doing the vital work of the church. And while there are far too few, I think the church also does well engaging women in the institution insofar as consulting. So women consult for the bishops' conferences, women consult for the Vatican, and I think most commendably, great work, Pope Francis, on the Sex Abuse Commission. Pope Francis really took the initiative to make sure there were women on that as well as men, and I think that's an area where the church is doing well. And I think it's vital to bring women to the table for decision making, and right now we see women that are doing that every day, and as Petra said, they already sort of operate in the periphery, and all we need to do is just bring them closer to where the heart is beating of the church, because women already are the heart of the church.
When I listen to both of them talk about women, whether it's religious or lay, we can't talk about women's role in the church without talking about the role of motherhood, our mothers. And mothers are the heart of every family that crosses every culture around the world. And most of us receive our first witness of faith through our mothers. And I think of my own mother, where she was very devout Catholic. I come from a big Irish Catholic family. And so you can't help but have church as part of your culture. And she also taught us about service. And I think that women, by our nature, we are nurturers. And so that really fits. That's a voice that really fits for us. But I think about my own story, I've been influenced by Sister Giovanni, school sister of Notre Dame, my first boss, who was a force to be reckoned with. Sister Mary, you remind me of her when you were talking about your own work in the Bronx. But Sister G saw on the west side of St. Paul, Minnesota, saw a growth of Latino gangs and rival gangs that were entering into violence, because most Latinos were undocumented immigrants and couldn't get into school. And so the way in to society were the gangs. And I worked with her with the immigrant populations. I later worked at Catholic Charities for another powerful woman, Marguerite Loftus, who ran our refugee program. And both of these women, I think that we can talk about women's giftedness and heart, but not to overly romanticize it or think in terms of stereotypes. Because the women that I've met have been visionaries. They have changed systems, they changed policy and laws, and I witnessed both of them literally impact the immigrant and refugee policy in my state. And I can tell you there was not an archbishop or a corporate executive or a mayor that would say no to them. So I think, those roles are played also and really important for us to think about when we have this dialogue of women's impact.
Oh, you want me to speak? I would say three things, and I'm going to take a more macro perspective rather than micro. The first, in the work that we do, CRS, to go out into the world where people are very, very poor and very vulnerable, we truly see the commitment and the labor of the church in serving women and girls, whether it's education, healthcare, HIV/AIDS, and so on. So that cannot be discounted, that the church has been working for the well-being of women. The second point I want to make is that whether it is out of necessity or whether it's out of invitation, about 80% of the work of the church is done by women outside of the clerics.
Absolutely.
So actually, the formation of people in faith, the evangelization work, the witness work that is being done by women. And so the impact of women is felt in that extensive ministry. The third and final point is different people have acknowledged that actually in the United States, women, many women hold high positions in the Catholic Church. Among Catholic universities, I think there are more Catholic women as presidents than in secular universities. Many hospitals and so on, and even in dioceses, chancellors, general councils are women. What that actually shows is that the practice of empowering women and the ability to share power with women is there.
Thank you.
You know, I want to agree with you, Carolyn, because if we're talking about opportunities for women's voices to be heard in the church, we've got one right here. You have 4 women sitting at a panel discussion, and our voices are being heard. So, you know, it's living proof that this is happening. And from my own personal experience, like you've already said, I grew up in an interfaith household, and I grew up with this duality of religion that shaped how I viewed the world. But I also grew up with a very strong female role model in my mother, because as Geraldine said, your mother is usually your first introduction to your relationship with God. And my mother was an excellent role model. And one of the things that she was part of last year in India was they instituted a gender policy within the church in India. And what's exciting about it and what's great about it is that they work with the church. So the church and women, the 3 women were invited to draft the policy. So you had people working alongside each other in order to encourage equal representation of women within the church. And I think that's fantastic, the way you have this collaboration, so there is stuff happening all around us as we speak.
Yeah. I'd be interested just to follow up on your comments. We have a sort of a cross-generational panel here. Do you see differences given your own kind of history with the church, what you have seen over the years, those of you who might have a little more experience in this? How have you seen changes? And I'd be curious if our younger panel members have also seen those changes or sort of, in a sense, received what our more senior panelists might have observed over the years.
Carolyn, I think you and I are the senior panelists.
I wasn't saying anything.
You go first.
Well, I think it's been interesting being here in Rome at the Vatican as a group and just getting to know particularly the younger panelists. And there is definitely an age difference, a generational difference in how we experience church. And I think the more interesting comments come from our 2 millennials here in terms of the insights that they've even given me as they talk about themselves, but also their friends. I think I grew up, as I mentioned earlier, when you grow up in a family where church is not something you do on Sunday, but it's literally part of your identity, it's part of your culture, the history of your family. I had an uncle that was a bishop and many that were priests and nuns, and so it simply becomes part of how you see the world. And seeking, I think in that case, the difficulty often is to move away from a faith of your father or mother, if you will, and to really go through the search yourself to have a mature faith, where you're asking the kinds of questions based on your life experience, and where you then move away from what you've inherited, but begin to develop a depth on your own. I had a kind of a crisis of conscience when I was in my 30s. And my father died suddenly from a working class family, and he had no life insurance, and left my mother and 4 sisters really with very little financially. And at that point, some of my sisters and I were more educated than our mother. It was a very scary time. There was a Jewish man that owned the grocery store I worked for, Milton Fagel. And he was incredible and oftentimes gave food to our family, but was always in a hurry, always left the car running, and would bring overstock to my mom. And if my mom tried to pay, it was always like, I've got to run, the car's running. No, I have no time, I have no time. Anyways, Milton became like a father to me. His daughter, Cheryl, was one of my best friends. I often went to synagogue with them. Cheryl came to Mass with us. And Milton died when I was 30 or 31. And I was crushed. He was like a second father to me. And I went to my uncle, who was a bishop. He's passed away since then, but my uncle, Bishop Dudley. And I went to him at that point and said, I need to tell you face to face, I'm leaving the Catholic Church, because I refuse to believe that Milton Fagel will not enjoy the arms of God. Milton was more Christ-like than many Christians I know. And my uncle hugged me and said, Geraldine, I'm so happy for you, because he said, you're absolutely right. He said, I'm sure Milton was greeted, well done, good and faithful servant. And what he told me then is something I've hung on to. He said, what you're distinguishing is between what is the word of God and what is the word of man. And he said, your questions can always be answered with the truth, the word of God. That our institution, he told me, as a church, has been ruled by very holy men, and we've also had some bad men. And so he said, never take everything for granted, discern, because your faith will withstand your questions. The Word of God always does. With that, I cried, and I said, I want to be a Catholic still. But you know, that was something that really informed me and made me fearless about questioning. Mm-hmm. In fact, he told me it was our duty, that the church is only made stronger from that.
In fact, you know, Geraldine, my mom always said the path to holiness is paved with questions. And we grew up with that in mind. And because both of my parents are very spiritual, my father is Hindu, my mother is Catholic, and as my brother once said, usually in these sort of situations where you have an interfaith marriage, you have one or both people who aren't religious, because otherwise there's a lot of friction. Now, in our family, they're both very spiritual. So we grew up privileged. Okay, we never saw it as a disadvantage. We always felt we were privileged to grow up, you know, with 2 very different spiritual identities that ultimately merged into one. And for me, I chose to get baptized when I was 22. And it was never a decision. It was never, you know, oh, did you finally decide to pick being Catholic? I didn't pick. I was always Catholic. You know, just because I am Catholic doesn't mean I'm not Hindu. It wasn't a question of picking one over the other. And I think very often there is that internal monologue. Nicole and I were talking about this earlier, where you wonder, am I Catholic enough? You know, I always feel a little insecure, a little uncomfortable. Like, do I deserve to be here? Am I Catholic enough? And I've had experiences that sometimes have reinforced that, because when a few years ago, my mom and I decided that we would go for Mass on my birthday, and my mom was delayed, and I happened to go to a church that I'd never been to before. Now, I don't know what it was, maybe how I was dressed, or maybe I just gave off this vibe, but when I went to receive communion, the priest looked at me and decided that I didn't look Catholic enough. So he said, are you Catholic? And I said, yes. And he said, well, how do you receive communion? Now, to me, that seemed like such a simple answer that I thought, no, this is a trick question. You know? And I froze. And then he said, when is the last time you've been to confession. And I don't go to confession. So I was like, oh my God, what am I doing here? I shouldn't be here. I want to go home right now. And he said, you know what, please wait. We will have, we will chat after Mass. And I felt like I was in high school and I was being punished by the principal, and I stood on the side while everybody else in that line received communion. And I waited about 3 minutes before I ran back home, by which point my mom had just reached from work. And I think we were in the car park, and she saw me. She took one look at my face, and she was like, what happened? Are you okay? And I just sobbed. I was crying. It was terrible. And I told her what happened, and you don't want to get my mom mad. She marched right after that church, and she spoke to the priest, and she said, you know what? You had an opportunity to make somebody feel welcome. And instead, you turn them away. And I'm going to be honest with you, I haven't been back to that particular church since.
Good move.
Yeah. But I'm just saying, this is the sort of experience that a lot of millennials like me face. We feel like maybe just because we don't follow the same rules that our parents did, or we don't necessarily always go to march every Sunday, or we choose not to go to confession, we're not Catholic enough, and then we feel like we're denied a space within the existing structure of the church, and our voices aren't being heard. And if we don't have a space, how are we going to make a change? How are we going to make a difference?
Yeah.
Because I want to be a part of the structure, and I want to make my presence felt.
Yeah.
Tom, I want to say there is a gender difference. So I would say, Geraldine and my growing up, we only saw religious women doing the work of the church. Our mothers were volunteers. Actually, I didn't grow up in a Catholic household. But we did not see lay women doing the core work of the church. So that is a major difference. The fact that there is this particular forum, the fact that I'm CEO of Catholic Relief Services, and so on and so forth. I think the generation that followed us actually do see lay women in the work of the church. And that's very, very important because it allows for a different imagination.
Yes.
But I think there are two other influences going on too, and that is the generation that follows us also settles for less. They ask more questions because in these last 40 years, women have woken up and asked, I am not just happy with what is at the margin. They ask more questions. And so I think those are the two cross-cutting. You will have a generation who will ask those questions and expect those answers.
I would like to also take this opportunity to say we are not knockoff Catholics. Our Catholicism is legit as millennials. Our Catholicism is legit as women. And so when we have these experiences that Gaia had, I really think it does the church a disservice by turning young people and young women away, because the fact of the matter is I don't think this panel in any capacity is trying to be punitive toward the church, even if we've had negative experiences. This is not a critique per se, but really an opportunity for the church to utilize the valuable resources that young people and women are. And so to speak to your question, Tom, about what change we've seen, I want to echo everything we've already heard, which is that first, lay women. First of all, women religious are outstanding and amazing, and I love them. But seeing lay women do something for the church meaningful and visible and authoritatively makes all the difference in the world. And in my lifetime, I had that point where I realized, women can do those things. And so being surrounded, even just in this room, as I said, are so many women that I admire. I've had so many gifted advisors, an outstanding mentor who really have just driven to the heart of the church and made their voices heard. And I think that's a big difference for millennials. But as Gaia said, we want to have a space to occupy, and so that is where I think there's a bit of a break, because although we've seen a lot of great changes in the church, things my grandmother and my mother maybe have not experienced, millennials ask the questions. They don't, as Carolyn said so well, settle for less. They want to know, why can't women do this? Where are the voices that look like me, that believe the things that I believe. And I think that's where the church has, as I said, not a problem, but really an opportunity.
Thank you.
And I would just, a few words, maybe I'd move our conversation geographically a little bit. So I come from the Czech Republic, which sadly now is one of the most atheist countries in the world after 50 years of communism. And for us, I'm the first person in my family in the 3 generations who has found her way back into the church. And the question of women expecting more is not just a question of young women, but it's a question of the generation of my mother, who is a professional woman who has her whole life been in a workplace where she has had a lot of opportunities, but also had to struggle sometimes in professions that were always a little more male-dominated. And when she comes with me to church, she might be excited about, being part of this tradition. She might be curious about coming to Mass with me. She might be curious about the things that I've done after I've converted. But there's this barrier that she will never cross because she doesn't see people like herself in the church. And so I think it's not just a question of keeping the people who might be leaving church, but it's also the question of evangelization and of bringing people to the church who are not seeing themselves right now.
Yeah. I think that's a very good point, that your experiences both generationally and where you come from gives each of you a different perspective on this question. And since you said you were fearless about questioning, Geraldine, I like to slide into that next side of, we've sort of touched on, we've commented on what's working and where some real opportunities have evolved and opened up for women. Where are some of the places that opening, that process still needs to move?
Well, I think I've worked over the years for and with a lot of institutions in very diverse situations. The one thing I know is institutions never change because they should. They change when it's in their self-interest. And so part of the question we have to ask ourselves is, what is the current self-interest of the church? And I think to myself, when I think about the global issues that our church faces, whether it's Boko Haram, ISIS, female infanticide, genital mutilation, human trafficking, which is really sexual trafficking, we all know that. You know, the target of all of those too often are women and their children. And as women, as we said, we're often the heart of the family. And so for me, when we look at where will the solutions come for those issues the church is facing today, they have to come from the people that have lived those situations, which is part of what we heard from our speakers this morning. In fact, it's the only place that those answers will come from. I myself have been a victim of both sexual and physical violence. And for many years, much more than I wish I had lived, but I lived in silence, and the power stays of the violence unless you have the opportunity to speak about it. And then you can begin to move into having survived it. And I think that statistics show that 1 in 4 women will experience violence in their lives. And that is not, that's across the world. That's not geographically specific. So the reality is as we think about church, as we think about what we said, the role of women in bringing faith to the next generation, and when we think about the strength of their survivorship around the key issues of today, now I can begin to talk about the self-interest of our church, to have women at every level of engagement, because it is the way our church will expand. And Tom, you said something the other day in one of our conversations, and I don't remember what you talked to, but you said there was some study that showed that women are actually leaving the church.
Or fewer young women are, in a sense, maintaining their faith. There are more men maintaining their faith than women, at least in the States right now.
Thank you. I just remember that general comment, which again is such a dangerous environment for us to be in when we begin to really understand the role of women in the church, women in civil society, women in business. And so we need that voice in the church. And I think we need to come at it from that perspective of understanding the key issues of the church and where we will find solutions.
Thank you.
Yeah. Maybe I'll follow up on that. Geraldine, you spoke about it being the self-interest of the church to attract women, and so I've also spent some time thinking about how that can be done. And a lot of people on the panel already mentioned that maybe in the past it was religious women who were really the face of women in the church. And so I spent some time thinking about, okay, how can we distill some of this? If the religious women are the greenhouses of women in the Catholic Church, what can we do to now plant beyond the greenhouses? And I thought, being in formation, I drew on my own experience and thought of the formation of women religious, which has a component of really growing into depth in spirituality. It has a component of education, and it has a component of really practical ministerial experience. And for the folks out there who've never had that experience, it's like doing different rotation over a period of years, different experiences in the church. And I thought, okay, maybe we could take this, and what would be the equivalent that could bring more women into the center of the church? And I thought, maybe fellowships. What if we did fellowships for women in the church, where women with maybe a couple years of practice in the field, so to say, or women who are in their mid-careers, would be able to come into a program and bring their experience maybe to the Vatican or maybe to a diocese, and to be encouraged to become part of this structures. As some people pointed out, we have a lot of women in healthcare and schools, but maybe we need to make the next step of making them present in the center of this hierarchy. And so maybe that would be one idea of planting seeds. And again, as Geraldine said, to really actually attract women at this point, because women have a lot of opportunities these days, and it should be in the self-interest of the Catholic Church to attract the best of the best, because it really makes an impact for the whole community.
Absolutely.
I would like to echo a little bit of both of what we've heard, and I think that it's a top-down and a bottom-up model that is really what the church needs to adopt at this point. So women need to be entering the structure of the church on high managerial levels. There should be women on every parish council, every pastoral council, every finance council. They need to be advising in dioceses, they need to be advising in parishes, and they need to be advising more in the Vatican. I mean, and this can be a numbers game. There's nothing wrong with looking at numbers and adopting a policy, as you said, which is happening in India, saying there needs to be certain numbers. Numbers and percentages are not scary things. They are very useful things, and sometimes that's what you need to make sure you're accomplishing what needs to be accomplished. In that same vein, I kind of can't help but wonder why there are two pontifical councils that would have really great spaces for women not being run by women. I'm looking at the Pontifical Council for the Laity. Hi. I mean, really, it baffles the logical mind why a non-lay person would be running the Pontifical Council for the laity. This is just logic. and the Pontifical Council for the family, what a great opportunity that would be to have someone in the space who, as far as the church defines a family, is part of a family. And so a component of that top-down method is that women not only need to be in leadership, but they need to be in visible leadership. It's not fair that I can name women in leadership in the church because I'm really into this topic. I talk about it a lot. That's just cheating. I want my mother and my grandmother to be able to name, let's start with five women who are making really important decisions in the church, because those are not the nerds of the Catholic Church, but I'm okay with it. I can live with that. But the women who are being Catholic day to day really need to be able to name that. And I think if they can name clerics, they should be able to name women engaging in the church. And so that's the top down. And when you're appointing those women, it shouldn't just be women for the sake of appointing women, but appointing women who are invested in these things, women who have been to the peripheries, have been to the margins, have served, as we heard Cecilia talk about today, who are the warrior women. Those are the women who should be bringing their voices to the table, not just women for the sake of having a number. So that's the top down. And for me, the bottom up, I'm really interested in a cultural shift that needs to happen in the Catholic Church. So when I think of the story Gaia told, that's where I see a real need for a cultural shift. Because when we say all are welcome in this place, do we actually mean all are welcome? And I wonder that with the Catholic Church today. When we have young people or women who have great ideas or want to engage in their parish or diocese, they want to lecture, they want a Eucharistic minister, they come to Mass and, okay, they came at the wrong time. Do we turn them away? Do we scoff? Or do we really bring them in and figure out how to utilize their gifts and talents? Because here's the thing. Those women, especially the young women, as we talked about before, have, as Petra said, every opportunity in the secular sphere. I'm 24 years old, and I have every confidence that if I wanted to, I could be president of the United States. I believe it. I'm just laughing. I'm like, excuse me, I'm fabulous. Thank you. Thank you. You're all welcome to call the United States government. But women can be president of the United States. They could be the prime minister of their countries. They could be a Fortune 500 CEO. They can succeed in any sphere. So why is the church the last frontier on that? And then how can you be... yeah, that's cool too. I'm about it. Yeah. It's too much for the ego. Sin of pride. But I think that it's just the church, again, doing itself a disservice, because that is a brain drain. It's a brain drain, it's a talent drain. So right now, if the church wants to stop that and really utilize those gifts and talents, they just need to let that wealth blossom. It's there. The seeds are planted, and we just need to continue to nourish them.
You know, it's interesting what Nicole says, because we're talking here about equal representation within the church, and we're talking about looking at women in leadership roles. And to me, what I think is really important is you need to be introduced to women in leadership roles from a very young age. Because as Geraldine put it, women may be the backbone of their family. But to me, I think women and children, they come as a package deal.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be sexist, but women and children tend to come as a package deal, at least within the church. And the children are our future. So what you want is you want to be raising children who look at both men and women on equal footing in the church. And I think one of the best ways to instate that. Now, I'm an educator. I work with high school students. And what I love about them is every day for me is a learning experience, because they're always questioning. They always want to take things apart and figure out why and how and what next. And I think the church is the church has such a great opportunity to do that with young people. I mean, you have Sunday school, you have Catholic schools. When you're teaching them the catechism, when you're doing Bible study, you have the opportunity to teach them a little bit of theology as well. Get them to question, get them to reason, because that is not going to encourage dissent. That is going to make their faith stronger. Yeah. And you're going to then be able to teach them that men and women have the leadership skills that are equal to each other. So young women, young girls are going to grow up, thinking, hey, I can do that, I can be that. And that's really what I want for the future of the church.
Tom.
Carolyn.
So before I start, I just want to say women are knocking on the door of the church. And sometimes it's wearing for the people who is on the other side of the door. And too much knocking. And, you know, I like that particular analogy because scriptures tells us, you know, those who knock the door will be open to you. So I do believe in that. But I also have the fear, and that is the generation of women that follow us, not the people at this table, but many, they will stop knocking. And you know, there'll come a day when there will be the silence of people not knocking, that the young women who follow us, they cannot imagine the life behind that door. They begin to not see that door at all. And so I think the greater fear for me is we are knocking right now, but a generation will come where they may not knock. And I think that's what the church faces. And I also want to say this conversation about women in the church is not for the women. It's actually for the church.
Yes.
And there are 5 things I want to talk about. I mean, look, I was the dean of a business school, so I see that last 30, 40 years how women come into the whole corporate world. There's a whole set of things to do. But I think that this conversation is richer than that. I don't want to talk about what you can do, but I want to talk about 5 types of contrasts, because these are the contrasts of how women are thought of or engaged. The first one is that we do have women leaders in various positions. The issue is taking it from the exceptional and the occasional to the habitual, so that it becomes part of the regular process, that there is the expectation, there is a pool of candidates, there is a sense of what councils and advisory boards and so on could have that, but moving from the exceptional to the habitual.
Yeah.
The second is that women are engaged, but I have the question, are women engaged as family, or are they engaged as guests, or are they engaged as guest workers? Right? And I leave you to sort of think through that particular analogy. The third, the voices of women. Are those voices taken as kind of a little threatening, or are they thought of as enriching? And I think because so much of the conversation, particularly the dominant conversations and the loudest conversations, have focused on women ordination, which is off the table. But whenever women plead or speak or recommend or propose, there's this skepticism and suspicion. Is this conversation leading to women ordination? Is this a slippery slope so that everything that women want eventually is to the priesthood? So that's why could women be installed, not just act as lector, but all of this, there is a suspicion when women speak, is this all leading to women ordination? And I think that is unfortunate, because along the way we fail to hear sort of the voices of the mothers, of the single mothers, of the lay pastoral associate, whatever. So the voices of women, are we a little, find it just a little suspicious of where that conversation leads, and I think we should check that. I only have 5 points, so just so that you know where I'm going with it. I think the 4th point is, different popes, not just Pope Francis. Pope Benedict also referred to the term of feminine genius. And a lot of times when that term is evoked, it's evoked to mean women's sensitivity, women's intuition, intuitiveness, women's ability to attend to others, to nourish, to care, women's loyalty and their steadfastness. Well, that's wonderful. In fact, it's daunting to live up to all of those. But what about women as social critics or social activists like Dorothy Day?
Yes.
What about women who are scandalous like Dorothy Day? and Mary Magdalene and the woman at the well.
Yeah.
What about women who are entrepreneurial, hard-headed, persistent, and sometimes even defiant, like many of the women religious who founded their congregations and sustained it, the women who followed them, who went into these territories to establish what they do? What about those women? What about women who really take the spiritual works of mercy seriously, like Catherine of Siena, who wrote words urging the Pope and the political leaders to change their ways? All right, what about those women? So the conversation about feminine genius, is there a place for the other part, which is a bit thorny, which is a bit pushy? But that, if you look at the history of the church, those women did a lot. Absolutely. Joan of Arc, for example. So that's my fourth point. And my fifth point really is, I think the church really does minister to women. I mean, I work with the global church. I know what the church does. But I think we need to, in addition to service to women, is to think about the rights of women. The rights of women to own land. The rights of women to not be married off in a child marriage. The rights of women to education, so that we're not just ministering to them in their misfortune. We're actually standing with them to understand how to create an environment through rights. Rights are very important ways to protect women in society. So I think those are the 5 things I want to offer for thinking. But I also want to have 2 cautions. And that is, I'm not totally comfortable that a lot of conversation is about titles and so on. Because I think Pope Francis has this sort of teaching against the lure and the temptation of clericalism. I don't think women should be going after that, which is that the sense of privileged status. And I think the second thing is, I hear a lot about that, and we're in the Vatican. I think there's also a danger to thinking of the Vatican as the heartbeat of the church. The Vatican is the power structure of the church in many ways, and women need to have a seat at the table as family. But I just urge women, in all the really inspiring stories we hear of the different priests and nuns who showed up at the right time, and lay women at the right time to allow life to move forward. So I just want to also caution against those 2 things.
Thank you. So let me feed this back to you. We began, I think, with a good image, Geraldine, of what is in the church's self-interest. And let's face it, all of us have self-interest, but it's not always enlightened self-interest. It's an interest which is comfortable. It's a self-interest which is familiar, which is, in a sense, the way it's always been. And I think all of you have been talking about how do we, not just on an affective level, but also on an intellectual, and I would want to say spiritual level, how do we push these questions out? So let me just, if we've still got a few more minutes to talk about, where might that enlightenment come from? Where do you see moments of enlightenment happening right now, and what does that enlightenment look like to you? Where do you see, and where would you want to push for that enlightened self-interest to really make a difference right now?
Well, I'll tell you what comes to mind for me is, and Carolyn, I love your points. Thank you so much for being so specific, and that's so helpful to this conversation. But a simple thing that I think about is, I think so much of some of the fear of where the conversation's going to go comes from really not understanding what women want. That I don't want to be a priest. And a lot of us don't. We love this church. We're here because we love the church. And so one thought that has come to mind for me is, wouldn't it be incredible if Pope Francis would just want to ask that every seminary have a women's study course? And imagine what a young seminarian would come out if during their preparation they studied and understood the role of women historically. And I don't mean just in the church. I'm talking about understanding the role that women have played in government, in business, leading nonprofit and movements. And imagine if we had every young seminarian coming out understanding that voice. What might that do as he then goes out to wherever he's placed? And, and I think that could be a good step, because I can't imagine if the seminarians really understood the history and the role of women, that they wouldn't want them engaged to help do whatever their work is. So.
Thanks.
I think to some extent that's already happening in India, because I know a lot of seminarians who also have to study feminist theology as part of their course.
Fabulous.
We were just talking about it earlier, and I think that's, clearly a positive step.
So where would you push the enlightenment right now? What's that one thing that you would like to see happen to move this forward?
I would, honestly, this is coming from the heart, I would like to see welcome. As a millennial, as a woman, that my experience at that church the last time, it could have gone two ways. I could never have gone back to church, but I did. And I think that for a lot of us, we would love to come back to the church, and we would love to be a part of it, because for many of us, church is family, And I think feeling welcomed is a huge step in the right direction. Just welcoming people back and not telling, not passing judgment. And I think Jesus would approve.
Yes.
Agreed.
Any other thoughts on enlightenment?
I think when we think about this sense of enlightened self-interest, one thing that really comes to mind, and I'm just putting this out on the table, is when I've been talking to women who are maybe a little more experienced than me, let's put it that way, I am a millennial, and I talk to them about, sometimes this feels really frustrating to be constantly raising my voice. Every single one of them talks to me about the prayer that is often attributed to Oscar Romero, about planting the seeds and being a prophet of a future not your own. And I think if we really want to move this enlightened self-interest, as you so eloquently put it, we as women in the church really need to orient ourselves in that humility to say everything we do on some level is work, and it makes a difference perhaps even just to one person, but that disconnect to say, I may never see the fruits of this labor, but that doesn't mean stop knocking. So I really see what Carolyn said before about that generation that will eventually not knock anymore as a clarion call for us to be really cognizant of the fact that we have to keep planting the seeds. We have to keep watering the seeds and tilling the ground. Because women in the church, I think, are an endangered species. They really are.
Tom, I would go back to what Carolyn said at the beginning about speaking to men. And I draw on my experience of working with women who have faced violence. And I think in the past years, this work has come into the important realization that when you talk to women about violence against women, well, that's great, but women can really imagine how bad that is. But you have to talk to men. You have to find allies among men who will stand up and say violence against women is not okay. And I think in the church we have to do the same thing. So I'm glad that you are chairing the panel today.
Yes.
That there have been other voices of men among us, and I think we have to really grasp these opportunities and to very consciously look for men who are allies and who will raise voices and say women in the church are important. Yes. Because we are all convinced, but we need to put this now a step further.
Thank you.
Tom, you say, who do you want to enlighten or what? I have a somewhat related answer. The first one is actually the most important people for me to get this verse is really my sons, and I have two of those. by the way, there's research beginning to show that when a young person makes decision about his or her faith, you know, this person grows up in some type of tradition rather than no tradition, the most important influence is actually not their peers. The most important influence are their parents. That when they make these decisions about what life they want and how to live it, they actually look at their parents' motto and say, do I reject it because I've never seen it work? Or can I do not want to walk away from it because I've seen how it works. So I think that actually the family is a very important place where you form these attitudes and acceptance. But for this panel, one of the strange things that I'm going to say is sometimes I'm tired of being the woman, like I'm an entity that people don't know. You know, like I want to say, you know me. I'm not a different species. It's like when my nephew was very young, and his mother's Canadian, his father's Chinese. We took him to Chinatown, and we kept on pointing out all the things which were Chinese. He came home and he said, I now got it. I'm half Chinese and half human.
Yeah.
All right. So
Yeah.
I think that in this
And exotic species.
Yeah. I just sometimes say, you have mothers and sisters and aunts, and you know us. We are not a different species. And I work with a lot of men and women. I never look at my colleague who is an EVP of strategy and say, she is a woman. And I work with somebody else, my chief financial, he is a man. Like it doesn't even enter into the equation. So I know it's ironic on a panel about this is someday I just want somebody to say, I know them. Yeah. They were in my family. They're not some species that needs a lot of, whatever, figuring out.
Back to what you said earlier. You're not guest workers, you're not guests. You are part of the family. We are part of the family. Our time is running out. I think for all of us, it's been a very rich day. I'd just invite us all to take just a brief pause here, reflect a bit on what we've been hearing, maybe earlier in the day or in this panel. And panelists, I would just invite you to share with all of us a word or a phrase that stays with you, which might be a touchstone for each of us to continue thinking about what we've experienced and heard today. So whoever wants to start, feel free, and we'll move to that person's right.
Since I'm on the end, I'll give you guys a little more time. Gracious and tenacious.
Gracious and
tenacious.
I'm just thinking, let's use everyone's gifts. They were all given to us uniquely for a purpose. They are all needed to be given.
Yours? Don't you have
one?
one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Tom?
Okay. Gratitude. Just hearing the voices of so many people for whom God entered their lives through one another. I mean, just incredible story. I'm grateful for what I have heard today and people's abilities to share their stories. That's what stays with me right now.
Welcome.
I was going to say that. Now you have time to come up with another one.
Together, we can go to a new depth and a new horizon.
Well, I'm going to go back to what Carolyn said, but just add a little bit more to it. I think it's really important that in order to empower, first we welcome. So, I'd like us to think that we welcome to empower.
Very good. I hope you've enjoyed this as much as we have enjoyed it. Panelists, thank you very much for this time together.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you. That was another just, I'm speechless, honestly, if you can believe that. Yes, you've taken my breath away, everyone. From from this morning to now. So as most of you know by now, the roots of Voices of Faith were born from the Fidel Goetz Foundation. And joining us with closing remarks is the president of the Fidel Goetz Foundation, Fidelis Goetz. Mr. Goetz, to you. Thank you.
Mercy requires courage. That was at the center of today's Voices of Faith event. And as we've seen, mercy comes in many forms. But when combined with courage, it's a powerful tool for change. Why? It takes courage to overcome personal adversities and become a social leader. It takes courage to overcome traditional boundaries and obtain and pass on education. It takes courage to venture into war-torn countries and offer peace. And it takes courage to forgive your tormentors. We've heard some very powerful stories today. And they should lead us. They should lead us away from the mic. They should lead us out of our comfort zones. It's our job to get out of these comfort zones and venture to the margins of society. Those are the people that need us most. Be they women or be they children, be they girls or be they boys. And especially the latter ones. The boys and girls are the future of our society and our church. As we've heard many times today, if we don't look after them, we will not have a church for a very long time to come. Where do we find this strength to do what needs to be done? As we've heard from all the ladies and men today, it's right here. It's within us. Go and look. I'm sure you'll find it. Keep knocking on these doors, please. Don't stop. Now is, of course, the point also for me to say thank you. Thank you, first and foremost, to all the speakers and panelists. You've made this a tremendous event. Thank you also to His Holiness Papa Francesco for his inspiration, for, I have to check all these names because otherwise I get them wrong, His Excellency Cardinal Pietro Parolin, for his generosity, respect, and support of the contribution of women to the church and society. And last but not least, to His Excellency Marcello Sanchez Sorondo, Chancellor of the Pontifical Academy of Science, for opening the doors to the Casina Pio today. I would like to thank, on behalf of the Fidel Goetz Foundation, the entire audience here in the Casina Pio, and of course, on our live streaming. You were a tremendous audience, and you supported the speakers and the panelists with your presence today very much. Finally, I would like to say thank you very much to my sister, Chantal Goetz. And of course, the entire Voices of Faith team in the fore and in the background, some of them you have not seen, that have made this event possible. And again, I ask you for a warm round of applause. I'd like to close with two more remarks. One is a scheduling event for your diary, please. March 8, 2017, Women's Day here in the Vatican. And second, let's go out there, be social leaders, and let's make changes happening. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Whispers of faith, sweet song in the distance, the gentle voices of faith. Murmurs of faith like song from your childhood, the tender voices of faith.
In the Spirit, we will be united if we share. Can you feel it? That flame that's been ignited in the air. Rumors of fate's new song from this moment, the different voices of faith. Suggestions of fate, small songs that are growing into unique voices of faith. Catch the Spirit, it will be celebrated very near. Can you hear it? That sound being elevated in the air. Journeys of faith from songs that are moving to arrive at the voices of faith. Pilgrims of faith bring songs newly forming. They burst out these women of faith. Female spirit, let the words define you without fear. It's a mystical movement. Let the right regenerate you if you there. This female spirit, this sits that prorogates throughout the world. Such a timely movement, and finally it's blooming in the air.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Cocktails all around. Have a great evening. Thank you for coming. Thank you.